The untold story of Esther, how one woman changed history. Did you know there's a book in the Bible that never mentions God's name, yet His presence is seen in every moment? That book is Esther, a powerful story of courage, faith, and divine timing. At first glance, it seems like a historical drama about palace politics, betrayal, and survival. But when we look deeper, we see the fingerprints of God in every detail. And by the end of this video, you'll see why you might be placed for such a time as this. The story begins in the 5th century BC, nearly 100 years after the Babylonian exile. The Jewish people are scattered, living under Persian rule after Babylon was conquered by King Cyrus. Once they had a promised land, a thriving culture, and a faith-driven identity, but now they find themselves foreigners in a Gentile society, stripped of everything they once had. How did they get here? After the reign of King Solomon, Israel split into two kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Both eventually fell to invading nations. The Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC, taking the people of Judah into exile. Then, about 100 years later, the Persians overthrew Babylon. This is where King Xerxes, also called Ahasuerus, enters the picture, ruling over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. Xerxes is known for his extravagance, impulsiveness, and ego. In his 3rd year as king, he throws a lavish 180-day banquet to flaunt his wealth. At the height of his celebration, he commands Queen Vashti to appear before his guests, possibly wearing only her royal crown. But Vashti refuses. In a society where women had little voice, this act of defiance was unheard of. Embarrassed and enraged, Xerxes banishes Vashti and orders a search for a new queen. Among the young women taken to the palace is Esther, a Jewish orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah, meaning myrtle, but her Persian name, Esther, means star. She is beautiful, wise, and full of grace, but no one knows she is Jewish. The women undergo 12 months of beauty treatments before meeting the king. Esther wins favor with everyone she meets, and when her turn comes, Xerxes chooses her as queen. Meanwhile, Haman, the king's most powerful official, is rising in influence. He is arrogant, proud, and harbors a deep hatred for the Jews. When Mordecai refuses to bow before him, Haman takes it personally. Instead of punishing Mordecai alone, he plots to exterminate all Jews. This conflict runs deeper than personal pride. The book of Esther is the only book in the Bible where both Mordecai and Haman are introduced with their ancestral lineage. Mordecai is a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin, tracing back to King Saul. Haman is an Agagite, likely a descendant of King Agag of the Amalekites, a nation that had opposed Israel for generations. Their ancestors had battled each other hundreds of years earlier, and now this conflict is rising again. Even their names reveal their destinies. Mordecai's name is linked to the Babylonian god Marduk, meaning warrior. Haman's name, however, sounds like the Hebrew word for wrath, a fitting title for a man whose rage drives him to genocide. Haman manipulates Xerxes into issuing a decree to annihilate all Jews. The empire is thrown into confusion. Mordecai mourns in sackcloth and ashes, urging Esther to intervene. But there's a problem. Cause approaching the king without an invitation is punishable by death, and Esther hasn't been called to him in 30 days. Mordecai's response is both a challenge and a prophecy. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone will escape. If you remain silent, relief and deliverance will arise from another place. But who knows? Perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this. Esther calls for a 3-day fast among the Jews, seeking divine favor. Then, dressed in her royal robes, she steps into the king's throne room. The entire palace watches. Will he extend his golden scepter and spare her life? He does. But Esther doesn't reveal her request right away. Instead, she invites the king and Haman to a banquet. Haman, thrilled to be included, leaves feeling powerful. But his hatred for Mordecai still burns, so he builds a 75-foot gallows to have him executed. That very night, the king cannot sleep. He orders the royal records to be read and realizes that Mordecai once saved his life from an assassination plot, but was never rewarded. The next morning, Xerxes asks Haman what should be done for the man the king wants to honor. Thinking the king is talking about him, Haman describes an elaborate ceremony. To his horror, the king tells him to honor Mordecai. Haman is forced to parade his enemy through the streets, declaring his greatness. At the second banquet, Esther finally reveals her identity and exposes Haman's plot. This wicked Haman has devised a plan to destroy me and my people. Xerxes storms out in rage. Haman, desperate, throws himself at Esther's feet to beg for mercy. Just then, the king returns and misinterprets the scene, thinking Haman is attacking the queen. Instantly, Haman is sentenced to death on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. But there's still one problem. The decree to kill the Jews is still in place, and in Persian law, a king's decree cannot be revoked. So instead, the king issues a new decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves. When the appointed day arrives, the Jews not only survive but triumph. Esther's courage leads to the salvation of her people. Mordecai is elevated to Haman's former position, and the festival of Purim is established to celebrate God's unseen hand in their deliverance. Though God's name is never mentioned in the book of Esther, his presence is undeniable. Let's summarize with a few lessons we can learn from this book. 1. God's plan is bigger than our fears. Esther didn't feel ready, but God had positioned her perfectly. Where has God placed you for such a time as this? 2. Faith requires action. Esther didn't just pray, she took a step of faith. What step is God calling you to take? 3. Prayer and fasting bring breakthrough. Esther sought God before taking action. Are you setting time aside to seek Him? 4. Community is key. Esther didn't fight alone. She called her people to fast and pray with her, who is walking with you in faith. 5. God is always working behind the scenes. Even when we don't see Him, He is moving the pieces into place. Esther's story is a reminder that we are called to be bold, to stand up for what is right, and to trust in God's perfect timing. If this encouraged you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments, where is God calling you to step out in faith today? Until next time, remember you were made for such a time as this.